welcome to How to Thrive in the Future of Job Search with Mike Tomasello. Our special guest was called a top career thought leader by the original shark, Kevin Harrington, from TV's Shark Tank. Despite being a strong introvert, falling asleep during his first ever interview, and being the first generation in his family to graduate from college, he's gone on to lead both startup and Fortune 100 teams across multiple countries with $1 billion in strategy responsibility. He's helped tens of thousands of job seekers to better jobs, from fresh college graduates all the way up to C-suite executives, having been paid to speak at universities around the world, including the University of Maryland, Purdue University, and IIT Delhi in India. He spent more than 24 years interviewing thousands of successful senior executives to research what does and doesn't work in career success, including job search. He's the CEO of Career Success Secrets. I'm excited to have with me Mike Tomasello. Mike, welcome.
For those of you that might not be familiar with my co-host is Albert Chen. So Albert was one of my first career coaching clients. Albert, what sort of results have you gotten in your job searches over the past 10 years or so?
In the last 10 years, I've had about 5 job searches. And with your insights and your assistance, I count about 32 offers in that time.
Got it. And I think the first 2 times that we worked together, you were averaging about 6 job offers. And then you realized, man, I don't really need that many. I can just be more selective about what I target. But up to 6 job offers is possible. And I want to let you know that you're not going to learn everything that you necessarily need to learn in an hour, but we're going to squeeze in as much stuff as we possibly can, so you can hopefully identify those areas where you might not be performing as well as you potentially could be, identifying what job search skills are going to be the better fit for you. Because I will tell you, Albert is exceptional. He has dedicated his life to becoming better at job search skills, and he puts a tremendous amount of time and effort into his job searches. And so that's why his results are exceptional. Do I believe you landing 6 job offers is possible in this economy? I do believe it's possible. And I'll be honest with you, like, I want to balance compassion with realism with you. Like, I don't want to make stuff up to get you excited that's not really going to work. It's going to require a lot of work that you're not necessarily willing to do if you want exceptional results. Albert, anything that you want to add to the conversation before we jump into the topics for today?
No, I think it's that I've learned a lot from you over the years, and I'm excited that those who are attending get to also learn a lot from you as well, and hopefully execute that within their job search, because that's really what matters at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I do want to point out that this is 100% free. Albert is volunteering his time tonight. He didn't have to do this, and all of the stuff that he does in his Albert's List community, the majority of it, he doesn't make $1 from it. My condition for doing this event tonight was, 1, I didn't want to promote any coaching or services, and 2, that we make this 100% free. So my ask is, if you get even one thing out of value tonight, is that once you get the recording or once you see this on YouTube, that you share this with someone else that might be job searching right now. That's all I ask. So with that, we will jump into some of the content. Awesome. So today's topic is how to thrive in the future of job search. And so most of you, and I want to acknowledge we have a lot of different people in the audience tonight. We have some people that have been job searching for 12 months, and we have some people that were just laid off last Friday. And so I want to acknowledge going into this that some of the nuances of saying might not apply to every single situation, but I guarantee you there is some piece of learning potentially for all of you if you're not executing on it well. So if an example doesn't apply to you, I invite you to write down what you did here, and I invite you to ask yourself, well, how could this apply to me? Or how could I use this to make it better? And assume there's learning in there for you, even if it's something you potentially heard before. Because I do have lots of people that are lots of career coaching clients of mine that are thriving in this market and that are going from job searching for 9 months before working with me to landing an offer within 1 or 2 months or at the first job that they interview after they start working with me together. I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen for you after this interview, but many people in my Facebook community, many people in Twitter tell me 1 or 2 tips, not necessarily everything, 1 or 2 tips made the difference in accelerating their job search. I don't know what that particular tip or 2 or 5 or 10 is going to be today for you. So I invite you to write them all and figure that out later. Part of the reason why I talked about why I wanted to call this the future of job search is because I have some bad news for all of you. Now, most of you who have been job searching for a while in this market know a lot of the challenges of this market. And some of it's economy related, but I want to be honest with you. The reason why I called it the future of job search is because there's some macro stuff that's going on behind the scenes that is making this future of what the challenges that you're occurring now is something that I'm afraid, even when the economy gets better, you're going to continue to experience a lot of them. If you expect to do exactly what you were doing the last time that you searched for a job 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 20 years ago, or when you were getting your first job out of college, I'm going to tell you the stuff that worked back then isn't going to work as effectively with some of the changes that have gone on. I'm a big believer on focusing on the positive and focusing on things that you can control. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the economy and whatever, because we can't control the economy. But the two macro things that have changed significantly over the past 3 years that almost no one is talking about is more people are more demanding of their careers and the jobs and where they work than ever before. Some of you are going, well, so what? Like, yeah, big deal. Well, the way that that impacts the job market is normal. In the past, 5 years ago or 3 years ago, when you were looking for a job, the majority of the people that you were competing with were already unemployed or about to quit their jobs or whatever. And now the pandemic, the panorama, as I like to call it, a lot of people are like, hey, I realize that this part of my job doesn't make me happy, or that I like this certain type of boss, or I don't like my industry as much as I thought of. And so this is causing more people that are currently employed to apply than ever before. Normally, someone would wait to do a job search until they're totally unhappy with their job. Most people are proactively or at least passively looking for a job, even if they're not massively unhappy. So that's creating more applicants in the marketplace that has nothing to do with the economy. I'm not saying that the economy and job market isn't unique. It is. I just want to let you know what also is going on, because some of the job searchers I'm talking to right now are like, well, maybe if I just wait 3 months or 6 months until the economy gets better, things will magically improve. And I'm going to tell you, that's a really risky proposition with more people that are currently employed applying than ever before. The other major macro trends is that people are much more location agnostic than ever before. Well, the obvious one is a lot of people would love to be doing remote work. And so, particularly for those of you that prefer remote work, we are seeing insane numbers for remote only positions, because that transition that we were hoping corporations would make to employing more remote workers, that hasn't really manifested. And if it does manifest, we're probably at least 5 to 10 years away from that. And I wouldn't hold my breath on that. What's actually occurring in the marketplace, where we were hoping that 20 to 25% of the market would be remote only. And I'll tell you, I do research on LinkedIn and other job boards periodically. When I looked last week, less than 5% of new jobs were remote only. Less than 5%. The last time I checked it before that, it was slightly more than that. So we're definitely trending downward. So you're either going to have to be really incredible and one of the best in the world at what you do for your level. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete for an entry level job, but for your level, if you want remote, you're going to have to be the best of the best of the best, and or get really, really good at your job search skills, which we're going to talk a heck of a lot today about. But it's something that people think, oh, well, like I'll just go out there and get a new certification or take a new course, and that'll make me look more attractive. That's usually not why you're landing more interviews and landing the offers. It's usually because your job search skills aren't as good as you think they are. Long story short, so Harvard University, some people consider that the most prestigious university in the world, but less than 14% of people get into Harvard. I didn't really come here to talk about Harvard today. I came here to talk about job search, but it helps you think about job search math, because most people would agree Harvard's pretty freaking hard to get into. Well, job search, even before the economy got the way it was, is much harder than people realize. So some job search math that I want to talk about, and I don't have a slide for this, so I would recommend that you take some notes. So most jobs get 250 to 6,000 applicants per role. So even if you're in a very specialized field, so I was talking to a Google recruiter yesterday, and she told me even though she was her role was for very specific skill set that not a lot of people had, she was still getting 200 to 250 applicants per position. So if you're applying online and nothing else, depending on the size of the company that you're applying to, I mean, your field and your industry have an impact. If you realize that only about 10% of people are even going to get a phone screen, then you're going to realize for a smaller company or a very niche that the average success rate, and some of you aren't average, but the average success rate for your type of position is probably going to be about 4% in terms of getting an interview. That's if I see Albert nodding his head. So I know the math is resonating with at least one person. And I encourage you to jot down these numbers. So to get things a little worse, the 6,000 or 2,000 applicants or whatever, the lower the amount of experience required and or the more desirable the job, the greater the chance remote work, for example, entry level work, working for a large company that's known for treating their employees well. They're potentially going to get the 2,000 to 6,000 applicants. And that's where your average applicant success rate, simply math, don't blame me. Like if I could wave a magic wand and give all of you jobs instantly, I would. But the math says less than 1%, about 0.5% for those really desirable companies are going to get an interview. So significantly harder to land a job than to get into Harvard, especially if you want to compete for some of the big boys. So some strategy options for you, because I like to be solution oriented and give you stuff right away. Some strategy options for you if you are getting below a 4% success rate, that could be a sign that you're applying for jobs that you're not as good a fit for. That could be a sign that your resume is not as good as you think it is. That could be a sign that your resume is simply not getting seen. That's a magic thing to star that we're going to be talking more about towards the end of this presentation. And so if you want to improve your success rate, one, you might want to stop targeting big companies and target primarily smaller companies because they tend to get less applicants. So not saying that has to be part of your strategy. It's just a suggestion. There are some really well-funded startups that are financially stable, and going to a smaller company in some cases might be safer than a big, large Fortune 100 or Fortune 1000 that lays people off every 2 to 3 years. There's pros and cons to both. So a little bit of job search math, and again, I encourage you to take stuff down. So we talked about the average job getting 10 people interviewed per position. So you're getting a phone screen with the recruiter. I count that as an interview, and you should count that as an interview. So in case you're not counting it as an interview, that might be part of the reason why you're not being more successful in getting a job offer. Because sometimes you can make it past the first round, but if you didn't impress that recruiter enough, they might move you to the second round, but you're not actually their first or second choice. And so when it comes to discuss all of the candidates at the end, if it's close between you and someone else, you might lose out because someone else improved the recruiter as much as you. So long story short, treat your interviews or phone screens with recruiters just as important as you might with the hiring manager. Albert, is there anything you want to add?
What I gather from what you're saying as we go through this current interview process is just or job search process in this market is that the margins are thinner than ever. You have to dot your I's, cross your T's, check your misspellings, and make sure
Oh,
that you show up in the best way possible because employers are looking for every reason they can to say no.
I love that. And it's not that employers want to say no to you; they want to
Mhm.
say yes to somebody. In most cases, they want to be nice, and at the end of the day, they only have one opening, and
Yeah.
so they need to narrow that down somehow. So another invitation is find things to find ways to take things less personally, and instead focus on what you can control and say, hey, what are those little bits of things that we can be doing to improve things? And we will be talking about that more soon.
And I agree with that fully. Like I think that more than ever, job seekers need to also understand where they fit in the puzzle of an organization as well, because with the economy going the way it is, a lot of businesses and companies are looking to go back either to the fundamentals or they want people to understand where they fit. So you have to be a strategic thinker. You have to understand that in any best case scenario, a company generally is not looking to want to hire more people, but they want to hire people because they want to grow. And if you help them grow in one way or another, then you help them get closer to their goals. And your ability to articulate that both in your resume and in your interview will pay you massive dividends.
Love it. So I do want to talk 1 or 2 more minutes about job search math. And so some of you are in the audience and you might be like, that percentage success rate is way too low. That is your sign that you are actually doing better in the job search market than you think you are for online applications. Okay. So don't assume because your numbers are different, because I'm just giving you math. I'm not giving you my opinion. You just happen to be outperforming the average, and that means there's something that you're doing is better than the average. I was just talking to an ex-client of mine. I worked with him 4 years ago, and he's like, "Hey, my job search is going well because I'm using the same stuff you taught me 4 years ago." And but he was like, well, at the same time, I wish I could be doing better. And I asked him his numbers. I said, how many jobs have you applied for? How many different interviews have you interviewed for? And it turned out his success rate was 30%. So he was outperforming what the average person does by 20 to 30 times. Now, if you're just applying online, it's really hard to get those success rates, but we will talk about a couple techniques and strategies in the rest of the thing that's going to help you do that. Some of you can guess what some of those are. The other part of uh-oh, the other part of job search math is how good of an interview are you? How good of an interviewer are you? So if the average job is having approximately 10 people interview per position, then that means your average chance of getting a job offer, if you're an average interviewer for your level, even if you're a director, even if you're a vice president, even if you're a high in demand software engineer who can, code like the bejeebies, your competition is probably very similar. And so your interview success rate is going to be approximately 10%. So here's the bad news. Math doesn't make stuff up. So if your chances are 1 in 10, then you might need to generate a lot more interviews to get to 10 opportunities before you get one offer. If you are outperforming that and outperforming that in the past, that is a sign you are a better than average interviewer. But the sign is you probably, if you're not happy with your percentage, me and my clients tend to get, because we get really detailed in terms of how to come up with the ideal interview answer, making sure that they're practicing stuff. And so a lot of us have a 30 to 50% success rate, which is 3 to 5 times better than the average interviewer. It's very rare. It's very rare that someone is out there where they have a 70 to 80% success rate in interviews. I don't know, Albert, like what's your success rate in terms of number of interviews to job offers?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like the last time maybe I did this on a large scale, it might have been somewhere in the 20 to 30% range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, like my thing, I think when I look at when I job interviewing, the way that I talk about it within my community is that interviewing is finding ways to mitigate your risk while also finding ways to increase your excitement or the excitement of the hiring team and what they
Mhm.
have for you as you go through the interview process.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So know your numbers. Track the number of times you're applying online. Track the number of times that you're getting a referral. Track the number of advice conversations or networking conversations that you're having with people. And track which of those actions that you're taking are generating interviews for you the best. Now, some of you have perfect resumes that are really hard to find. Maybe you're the exception to the rule, and the action you take is just applying online because your resume is just a perfect fit. Well, if you're having more success with that than any other techniques, that's fine. But I will tell you, the thousands and thousands of people that I've worked with over the years, whether they were a client or a student that I worked with at a university, I will tell you the vast majority of them, once they were forced to try finding other ways to apply, they actually found not applying online and doing other stuff was dramatically more effective. 10 times more effective, 20 times more effective, 30 times more effective. But you're not going to know if you don't track those numbers and do the math. And I'm a non-technical degree person. If you don't have a degree, don't worry. You're absolutely welcome here. All of this stuff still applies to you. But I don't have a technical background, but the math is still important for understanding success. So let's talk about some common mistakes that people make in the job search. Some of you are thinking, oh, I don't want to hear the most common mistakes because I'm better than most people, and so I'm probably not making them. We could do 1 to 2 hours just on the most common mistakes that people make in the job search, and we probably wouldn't cover them all. I will tell you, I work with a lot of high level people. I work with recruiters. Recruiters come to me when they're having trouble getting jobs, which a lot of them aren't in this market. And a lot of directors and vice presidents who have years and years, like they've hired hundreds, if not thousands of people that come to me. And when it comes to our own job search, we sometimes we can get cocky, we can get arrogant, especially if we've hired people before. And we don't realize that there's some small and important things that we could be doing that we're not doing. So the two major ones that apply to almost every single job searcher I talk to And I talked to 20 or 30 earlier today to confirm this. And I was like, yep, they're making this mistake. Yep, they're making this mistake. So, two most common mistakes. One, you are underselling yourself and you are not selling yourself well enough in terms of why you are a great fit for the role. I'm going to pause so you can write that down. You are not selling yourself as well as you think you are. So don't leave it up to the recruiter or the hiring manager to figure out why you're great. It's up to you, even if you have to get the support of family, friends, ex-coworkers, ex-classmates. It's up to you to figure out what your best argument is, because if the recruiter or the hiring manager has to figure that out themselves, they're probably just going to choose the next candidate, the hundreds of other people that are applying, or the 9 other people that are interviewing and finalists for the role. So underselling yourself could be interview, could be written. It applies across the board. The other major mistake, and it's much more common even with really high level people than I would expect, is you are doing something in the process to disqualify yourself, or you are doing something to scare things off. And so part of what I tell people is, well, your resume, your LinkedIn, your interview answers, you don't have the job yet. You might not even have the interview yet. And so all of your materials, or all of the words that are coming out of your mouth, should be supporting the argument why you're a great fit for the role or why you should get an interview. If you are including extra information that they don't really need, they're potentially overanalyzing that information. And here's where there starts to be disagreement with recruiters or whatever. But like, just to give you a very common example, none of my clients have months on their resume. So, the start date and the end date on a resume. Well, it used to be common that like we put the exact month we started and the exact end we started. And some people are still doing that. And if you have no major issues in your background, it's probably not that big a thing. But the longer you're in the workforce, pandemic, economy challenges, the more that there's a gap there. There's nothing wrong with having a gap, but no one's looking at your resume and saying, ooh, she has a really great gap there, we should hire her. No, they're saying, well, she probably has a good reason, but these 5 other people I could interview, or these 100 other people I could interview, don't have a gap. So I don't want to scare you if you have a gap. You can still overcome that through other great stuff in job search. But long story short, in terms of this example, well, if you remove the months from the resume and just list the year you started and ended, a lot of times you can cover up those gaps or make them look much smaller. So there are some recruiters out there that are old school and they'll go, well, they really should have their months on the resume or whatever. But here's the thing. All of my clients leave off the months, get more interviews than the people that fight me on this and leave the months off. So long story short, just because someone has a preference for what they want to see on the interview, if you don't think it's presenting you in the best light, then sometimes that's a sign you should ignore that recruiter's advice, unless they are personally helping you introduce you to get that particular job at that particular company. That's a different situation. But that's a sign where that person's advice is more about their preferences and not necessarily what's going to be useful in your unique situation. Because that's one of the difficult things about job search, right? Like, everyone has a slightly different situation. And so the right resume format for you might not be the right resume format for someone else. So that's the tricky thing. And so whenever you're choosing someone to follow on LinkedIn, or anytime you're choosing a YouTube person or video to follow, make sure that they're talking about exceptions to the rule, and make sure they're not saying always or never or whatever, because that's a sign they have a very antiquated way of thinking. And that advice because almost every piece of advice around job search and most things in life have exceptions to them. So those were the 2 most common mistakes that I wanted to talk about. Before I briefly talk about mistakes in social media, Albert, are there 1 or 2 ones that come up a lot with the job searchers that you talk about?
There are, and your first one is your first mistake of where job seekers sell themselves short is a one that speaks to me a lot because I look a lot at resumes and I notice that people like to rewrite job descriptions as opposed to talk about the impact they had on the organizations they served. There are so many people out there who are qualified for the roles that they are applying for, but you would never know.
Yeah, I love that one. That's probably number three for me. So I love the fact that you brought that up. And to dive a little bit deeper on that one, because it's so important. So far too many people look at the job description one time and then they just decide to click apply and start filling out the application, and they never look at the job description again. Now, I'm going to admit there's a lot of nuances to job descriptions. Sometimes they're vague, sometimes they're asking for way too much stuff. But for the most part, they're giving you data as to the things that would potentially be attractive to them. Now, you need to do some analysis. And if you have questions about this, please ask me. I'm happy to talk about it more. If you do some analysis of the job description and say, hey, like, I'm a product manager. They're looking for a product manager. Based on the jobs I've done before, I'd guesstimate that these five things that they're asking for are probably more important than the other things. And then you should be going back to your resume and double checking to make sure that those things are emphasized, particularly at the top of your resume. Same thing for the interview process. Oh, haven't looked at the job description in a while. Even if you're applying for all of the same job title, different companies, different hiring managers value different things. So if you're not double checking the job description and preparing for at least the top 3 to 5 things, that's a huge reason why you're not getting more interviews, and definitely why you're not getting more job offers. Because they can be like, hey, they worked at Facebook, they worked at Meta, like they clearly have done the job before, but then you're not highlighting anything in the interview about the stuff that they specifically mentioned in the job description that they want to hire you for. So that's the stuff that you really want to be looking for. Another person in my network, she was actually one of my mentors when I worked for the software division at Cisco. I'm hoping she's in the audience. I don't know, but she's applying for primarily chief of staff roles, and I'm going to give her a little bit of ambiguity, chief of staff roles and head of strategy roles. Well, those are two slightly different types of roles. So if she's not checking the job description and having at least a slightly different resume for each of those, and she's trying to combine both of those into one, that's part of the reason why she might not be getting more interviews. Or she gets to the interview because she's got some great companies on her resume, but didn't analyze the job description closely enough and say, okay, I'm good at 30 different things, but which of the 5 to 10 things am I good at that they care most about? And that's where I'm going to spend the majority of the time talking in the interview process.
Yep.
And we could do an hour just on this one topic. Anything I missed there, Albert?
Yeah, I'm of the belief if you break down the interview into their respective questions, one of the things that, that you get to know is that you're asked questions that are your factual based questions, your situational questions, which are your star questions, car questions, etc. And then the hypothetical questions where they want to know what you would do in a particular situation. Your resume should directly feed into your star questions. So you might say that you were at a company doing marketing and that you increased revenue by 125% through social media campaigns, email marketing, and content marketing. And as a hiring manager, that's a really, really great jump off point for me because that means I get to ask you, how did you use content marketing, email marketing, and marketing campaigns to achieve that? And so the easier you make it and the more you're able to throw that softball so that you get to hit that softball question right back or as an answer, the easier you make it for everyone along the way. No guessing games.
Awesome. I love that. Albert and I have talked about it, and we've decided we're going to go beyond an hour today. So even though technically we only planned on 20 minutes, we're going to go beyond that today. I promise you there's a lot more cool stuff to come. So uh, now, not selling anything at all. I'm not going to tell you about my coaching programs today. If you're interested in that, you have to reach out to me. Like, I just wanted to give free advice away today. However, I ask if you learn something from me today, I ask that you follow me on LinkedIn. That's all I ask. If you decide that you're not able to get your question answered today, and you want to get my feedback on your specific situation, Albert has also dropped the link to my free Facebook group. You're welcome to join that. Please fill out the questions, or at a minimum, agree to the group rules so that I know that you're not a scammer. And mention that you attended a webinar or an event from me or Albert. That way I know that you're safe to let in the group, because my goal is to keep scammers and people that are going to try to sell you stuff out of my group as much as possible. And I know Albert has sort of the same goal.
I think both you and I look forward to new group members and always making an impact on everyone's day as they come into our group.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to spend very little time on mistakes on social media. It's not as big a category as most common mistakes in general. But now you can do whatever you want, and sometimes you can get lucky and you can find someone sympathetic, especially in my community or Albert's community. Sometimes you can find someone sympathetic, and even though you make these mistakes, sometimes you might get some help. And I promise you, if you start interacting with people differently on social media, you will get even more help. So here's one example. And this is counterintuitive because, so let's take a LinkedIn post or a Facebook post. You just became unemployed, or you've been unemployed for a while, and sometimes you're posting and you're not getting a lot of engagement. And so sometimes people will be like, oh, I've been looking for a year, or like, I can't pay my bills or whatever. And of course, like, we all feel for those people because those people are hurting. So those people will get a bunch of extra likes and clicks and maybe even some supportive comments. But if you dive deep into their comment section, it's very rare that they're getting offered great pieces of help or referrals where someone's actually helping to do a big favor or make an introduction for them. They might get more job postings or whatever in their comments, but let's face it, most of you are not struggling to find job postings. If you are, then please ask that during the Q&A, because even if they're giving you a job posting that you've never seen before, you're still going to have that job math problem that we talked about, that the average person is still having a 1% to 4% success rate with their applications. And here's something that I had to understand about my business. And I'm going to apply it to job search, I promise. My social media postings that make me the most money, so the job postings that provide you the best help from your network, are often the posts that get the least engagement. I know that's counterintuitive. That's something that I've never talked about with Albert or whatever, but I've done the research. So again, you're seeing these unemployed people talk about their horrible situations, and they are horrible. You're welcome to talk about anything you want on social media, but they're getting a lot of encouragement, and it's not necessarily resulting in hardcore stuff. Here's how you change that up. You can talk about being laid off. You can talk about losing your job. You can talk about how difficult your life or your job search has been, but don't spend paragraphs and paragraphs talking about it. Spend 2 or 3 sentences talking about it, and then switch to, this is the important part. I hope you guys are taking notes right now. These are the specific job titles that I'm looking for. This is the city I live in, or the country I live in. These are the locations, or remote or hybrid or in office, that I'm open to. And This is an important thing that a lot of people leave off. What are the top 3 reasons that make you great at the jobs that you're sending people leads to? I look at a lot of postings online, less than 1% of people are doing that. So now people are seeing it and they're like, wow, like they're not just complaining about how bad their job search is. They're giving me telling me exactly what they're looking for. Oh, I have a friend that does that. I have a recruiter friend that does that. But some of you are leaving that out of your social media posts altogether. That's a huge mistake. The other portion of it is making the argument why you're a good fit for the job. Just because you held the job doesn't mean that you're exceptional at what you do. I wish we were all exceptional. So you have to tell them, because people don't have the time to look at your profile, to ask you for a resume or whatever. But if you tell them the top 3 reasons why you're good at it, they might be like, wow, this person sounds really amazing. I will take the extra step, even though I'm busy, to reach out to them and offer them an opportunity to interview or stuff like that. So make sure that your social media posts are not just about commiserating, but they're actually about communicating your brand and why you're a great fit for the role, and you will get more roles. I'll do one last social media tip. This is really common with my international audience. And anytime I say international, I love you. I worked in international business for the majority of my career. So anywhere out of the United States, particularly outside of North America, is what I mean with international. But Americans and Canadians make these mistakes too. So you see a job posting online, could be an Albert's list, could be on LinkedIn, and you type in the comments, I'm interested. Or maybe if you're a little forward thinking, you include 1 or 2 sentences and that's it. Well, that's a missed opportunity for the recruiter or for the hiring manager that posted it to start getting familiar with your background. So using the same tip I gave you with when you post yourself, hey, I think I would be excellent for the XYZ job title that you mentioned in your post, because they might have mentioned more than one job in their post. And these are the top 3 reasons why I think you would want to interview me. Or these are the top 3 reasons. Now, when you go to apply online or you go to send them a DM, they're going to be a lot more likely to remember your name and actually be looking for your resume. And don't make the mistake of, unless you are employed full time somewhere and you are afraid of losing your job, then go ahead and go to the DMs right away without commenting. But if you're not at least DMing the person who just posted it and then going to apply online, that's a huge missed opportunity for you to stand out. And that's the bulk of what we're going to talk about over the next 10 minutes is how do you stand out? Alrighty.
I love that transition. Yeah.
Awesome, man. So setting yourself apart. So a lot of times when, and I'll get back to the slide in a moment, but a lot of times when we're talking about setting ourselves apart, people get a little too creative. Some of you might have seen like the LinkedIn post that went viral where someone printed their resume on a cake and had it hand delivered or whatever. Well, that might have worked, but a lot of you are missing small, easy ways to set yourself apart simply because you're not thinking creatively in terms of, well, how can I do something a little bit better? Or how can I pay closer attention to the job description in terms of what they're asking for? And how can I articulate that better in my DMs or my emails or in my resume? So I always tell people, and my favorite marketing and success coaches preach the same stuff: choose clarity over cleverness. Choose clarity over cleverness. Or to say it in a different way, one of the ways you can set yourself apart is by doing more of the basics and easy stuff and mastering as much of the basic stuff as possible. And some people say, well, Mike, that's boring or whatever, or everybody else is doing that. Well, I'll tell you, a lot of the reason why people's interview success rate is 10% is 95% of people have not Googled what are the most common interview questions for XYZ title. Most people have not set aside 1 to 2 hours of their time and typed out, what do I think a good interview answer for this common question is for me? 90 to 95% of you are not doing that. So you're setting yourself apart by doing what other people aren't and mastering the basics. I think there was something else I was going to say on that, but let me. So going back to the Olympics analogies, so thinking about the 100-meter dash, So like the fastest man, the fastest woman in the world. I just took the men's numbers for the last Olympics because it was easier to find. The fastest man in the world ran the 100 meters in 9.80 seconds. Second place was less than a second behind him, 0.04 seconds. Third place, again, less than a second behind the first place. Fourth place, not even meddling, less than 1%. I was so curious by this that I went and I tracked down the last place finisher in all of the Olympics, not just the final heat, but all of the Olympics, and also the second to last. The person that came in second to the last place, so the second worst, was less than 2 seconds behind the first place runner. And the only reason why the last place person was more than that is I think he tripped or something during his heat or whatever. So what does this have to do with your job search? Well, if only one person gets the job, if only 10 out of 250 applicants gets the interview, or 10 out of 2,000 applicants get the interview, then you need to be willing to do the extra stuff that the typical people aren't. If you want to ask me a follow-up question to how to do this in more detail, or you're like, well, Mike, I tried to do this networking thing and it didn't work for me, there's an opportunity for you to ask a more detailed question. Anything we don't cover today, ask in my Facebook group. A couple additional ways to stand out. This is particularly for getting more interviews. So one, if everybody else is just applying online, then do more than everybody else. Are you also sending those DMs to people that have openings? And are you pitching yourself in the DM for why you're a great fit for the position and attaching your resume? I'll take it a step further. And most of you are going to go out and DM. And I'm telling you, there's something that's even better than DMs that most of you are not willing to do, which is part of the reason why you're not outperforming people that are just doing DMs. And that's emailing people. Now, you might not like email, but here's the thing about email, particularly with hiring managers during the business day check their work email way more often than they check their DMs. I know some hiring managers that are happy at their job and they're not on LinkedIn at all. I made that mistake before. I sent one of my close friends a LinkedIn DM. Didn't hear back from them for 6 months. They're like, Mike, you screwed up. You should have emailed me. I don't check DMs. So don't communicate with people the way that you like to be communicated with, or the way that you communicate with your best friends. Communicate with the way that's most likely going to get your message seen during their business hours, particularly for people that have openings. So a lot of people are like, well, Mike, I don't have their email. Well, you're not trying hard enough, because if you ask yourself the question, how can I get more emails, or how can I get someone's email address, and you Googled it or you asked ChatGPT, you would know how to find 98% of the people's on the planet work email addresses. Works at least 90% of the time. I might be exaggerating with the 98. At least 90% of the time you can find anyone's work email address. Then you're going to be one of less than 5 people, probably one of less than 2 people that emailed the hiring manager. So the next question I normally get is, well, how do I know who the hiring manager is? Well, you got to do some research and some analysis to figure it out. If you go to the job description, sometimes you get lucky and they tell you the job title of the person that's going to be your boss. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. Um, if you focus on one or two types of job titles instead of trying to apply to 10 different jobs, and you continue to become an expert on your job titles of choice, you will start to notice that the job title for your future boss, usually it'll be 2 to 3 different job titles. Then, so engineering developers, director of development, director of engineering, go on LinkedIn, do a people search. This is my favorite thing to do on LinkedIn, and 99% of you aren't doing it. Go to LinkedIn, do a people search, use all filters. Most of you don't even know all filters exist. Use all filters and search by job title just for people that are director, or just that people are vice president, or just that people that are chief officer. And
And I
you will
recommend going an even further step there too. And you might mention it, Mike,
find,
uh, filtering also by location, and even more importantly, by your warm connections. So for those of you
yeah,
who went to university or who are a part of a certain professional organization, you need to take advantage of that. Bring up those warm fuzzies, and then,
yeah,
bring that up in your professional introduction.
yeah, that's great. So part of the reason why I don't necessarily mention all of the different filters
Mm,
is because we're becoming more and more a world where there's a lot of variability. So
mhm.
your job, you might be in the Bay Area, the job might be posted in the San Francisco Bay Area, but your boss might actually be in New York City or Chicago or Lagos or Buenos Aires. So you have to, sometimes you need to experiment, particularly within your country. I would say focus on nationwide. If you get too many results, you can always narrow it down. But sometimes people put too many filters and they're like, oh, I can't find anybody. Well, experiment with the filters, and maybe you narrowed it down too much and that's why you missed them. With larger companies, Cisco, Google, the alphabet companies, Meta, they have a lot of different divisions on LinkedIn. And so if you just search by that one company division or the main company name, your future boss might be listed under a different division. So for that reason, I recommend people use the advanced filters and just list the company name, or experiment with listing Meta and Facebook or Google and Alphabet instead of just searching by one term, and then simply because the person didn't update, the exact part of the company they were in or didn't know any better, you're not finding the right person. So I'm going to wrap up with what to do with warm up your network, and then we'll jump into questions. What to do to warm up with your network. So here's a really easy thing that everyone can do. Even if you don't think you know the right people, even if you don't think you know a lot of people in your industry, pick 10, if not 20. I prefer 20. Pick 20 people that you're semi comfortable or more comfortable to reach out to. Can be ex coworkers, can be ex classmates, professors. It can even be friends and family, people that you don't talk to every week or every month, and just send them a text and say, hey, I've been thinking about you. I haven't spoken with you a while. How are you? Here's why this is so important. If you send out 20 of those, some people are going to be busy. Some people are get 100 texts a day and aren't going to see it. So if you just reach out to one or two people, you might have simply had bad luck, and you might take that personally or assume that people don't want to interact with you. That couldn't be further from the truth. So if you do 20 or 30 of these, you're going to get some people that are like, hey, it's so great to hear from you. How have you been? And then you can transition to a phone call, which I highly recommend, and then just catch up. So this is not exactly transitioning into the job search network quickly, but this is how you warm up your network so that the first thing that your contact you're doing with them isn't asking for something, and it's definitely not asking for a big favor. Now, you don't have to do the text thing. There's other ways to do it, especially if you're less conflict averse. And I recommend picking a list of 20 or 30 people and emailing them, because if they're not used to responding to your text quickly, then email sits in their inbox and eventually they might come back to it. Or now, if you know they DM a lot on a certain platform, then that's fine. But make sure that you're not making assumptions based on what you like. Make assumptions on what's most likely to be seen by them. So this is a really important piece. So how do you build a relationship with someone? It could be someone you just met, or it could be someone you've known for years or lost touch with or whatever. How do you build a relationship with them so they do want to help? So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I have tested this stuff thousands and thousands of times. Here's what I've determined. Doesn't matter if it's a stranger, although I prefer strangers that you have something in common with, like you were in the same sorority, or you went to the same university, or you volunteered for the same nonprofit, or you were both in military service, or you're Nigerian and they're a Nigerian living in the United States, or you're from Buffalo, New York, and you're both living in the San Francisco Bay Area. Some of you are trying to network and get the time and attention of people that are complete strangers that don't owe you anything. And sometimes that can work, but that's like less than a 1% success rate. Why would you do that to yourself? Instead, do some Google research and say, hey, what are the affiliations? What are the clubs I've been a part of? Where have I graduated and stuff? And let me look for people that mention those organizations in your profile. So for Albert, maybe he gets lucky and people mention Albert's list in their LinkedIn profile. Man, they're going to know who he is because of his community. Or for those of you that are software developers, a really popular community is the 100 Devs community. Well, if you search for 100 Devs on LinkedIn and look for the ones that are happily employed or whatever, and you're a member of the 100 Devs community, now you have something to bond over, and they're going to be more likely to respond to your message. Don't waste your time with stuff that's such a low percentage chance of success. It's going to make you feel like you're rejected, even though you're not being rejected. Albert, quick 1 minute, 30-second or 1 minute stuff in terms of warming up the network and reaching out to people before we transition into questions.
I've always liked what you have mentioned and taught about reading the room and looking for relatable points
Yeah.
around what it is that you have with someone. I think really that's the best way to go about it professionally, because if somebody reaches out from where I went to school or things like that, it always gets me to read, because there's so many messages being sent out every day, and I only have so much time to pay attention. And sometimes I'll look at a message and I'll just move away from it with the intent to come back later, but I don't, because it just wasn't memorable enough.
You did remind me of one thing slightly different than what you were talking about, but it helped me remember something. Are too many of you are trying to network with recruiters, and unless you have something strong in common with them or you're in the same community as them, they are the busiest people on the planet, low percentage chance of success. Here's the ironic thing about that. The recruiter, they can get you an initial interview, but the hiring manager, if you don't have the perfect background, the hiring manager is the only one that can make exceptions to that. Someone that works on the hiring manager's team are the people that have the influence over convincing the hiring manager to talk to someone that has gaps on their resume and problems. And so why aren't you trying to network with the hiring managers who have the most power instead of the recruiters? Some of you will have excuses for that. Some of them will be legitimate. Some of them won't. I will say you haven't looked hard enough. But let's pretend you have looked hard enough. Network with people. You should be building relationships with people that have the job that you want instead of recruiters. They have way more influence over the hiring manager than the recruiter, who might only work with the hiring manager once or twice a year. And by the way, I'm an ex-recruiter, both externally and internally. I love recruiters. Some recruiters are my best friends. I have had people skip the recruiter or the HR interview because they went directly to the hiring manager. I've had people skip extra side projects and extra technical interviews because they built relationships with people that actually worked on the team instead of doing what everyone else was doing and just applying online or reaching out to the network. Thanks for all the love and the encouragement in the chat. We're going to start with the questions that most relate to getting interviews, applying directly to the hiring manager, DMs, networking. We're going to try to tackle those questions first because I would argue they're even more important than your resume and your LinkedIn questions. There might be an exception on the LinkedIn part, but there's a lot of people that talk about resumes, and I'm telling you, you can have a mediocre resume and get hired in this market. I would prefer you have a great resume, but you can have a great resume in this market and not get a ton of interviews if you're willing to write great emails to people and you're willing to network and build relationships with people, what I would call advice conversations. Albert, are there any questions that you see that are related to networking, emailing hiring managers or recruiters, the stuff that's closer to getting interviews than just random LinkedIn or resume questions?
Yeah, so I think individuals are specifically asking how to get the hiring manager's email address and even beyond, say, finding them on LinkedIn. And so, I know there's various sales tools out there that could help you get there, like hunter.io and so forth.
Yeah.
But would love to hear what you have to say about that.
So I tend not to list specific websites and tools because here's the problem. I want this video to be useful 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now,
Mhm.
and websites and tools will change, and what's more effective will change. And so I know it sounds really elementary, but most of you aren't doing it. It's even faster to do your email address research through Google. So let me give you an example. So one of my favorite websites for finding an email address is rocketreach.com. Here's why I don't go to Rocket Reach immediately. Rocket Reach sometimes does not have the email addresses for certain companies that I'm looking for. So if I go to that website first thing and I don't find it, I kind of wasted my time. Also, a lot of these platforms are trying to sell you something and get you to upgrade or whatever. And I want to save you guys as much money as possible. So here's what you type into Google: email space format space company URL. Not actually the words company URL. Say, hey, I want to do cisco.com. I'm going to put in the URL cisco.com without the www. That's really important. And in your, usually 90% of the time on the first page of the Google results, you're going to get at least one, if not 4 or 5 different websites that give you the email format. And I see those of you in the chat window that are confirming as ex-salespeople or current salespeople that this works really well. This is how I learned this. I figured this out when I was a salesperson. So 90% of the time you will find something on the first page. If it's a smaller company or a newer company, you might have to do a second search where you delete the word format and just do email space URL. You will find random people from that company that have their email address listed on some random website, a nonprofit they volunteer for or whatever. You copy and paste that and you say, oh, this employee, it's not the employee I want, but this employee has first name dot last name at company.com. Now you just go to the LinkedIn person's profile, spell their name, and put them into that email format. You have their format. So we could talk about this for 10 or 15 more minutes, and I think there's more stuff. Do some Googling. If this did not make sense, Google the question, how can I figure out someone's email address? But for the most part, I gave you what works 90% of the time. So, what is it? Another question, preferably related to getting more interviews or networking, Albert. A question from Dina: how do you get past the recruiter to the hiring manager? So absolutely allowed, particularly because nobody does it. So I have had personally hundreds and hundreds of clients. We're talking thousands of emails to thousands and thousands. I am not exaggerating on that. Thousands and thousands of unsolicited messages to the hiring manager that we did not know the person. Out of probably 5,000 emails, there was one response where they were mad that we emailed them. And if I were to go back and I was to look at that email, it was probably a poorly written email and they probably applied for a job they weren't a good fit for. So are you going to get a positive response rate 100% of the time? No, but look at the online application response rates. Less than 1%, actually less than half of 1%. Maybe if you're lucky, you're getting 4 to 8%. My clients that email directly to the hiring manager, even if they're a complete stranger, they get 10 times more interviews than the people that don't do that. So sometimes, if you are a good fit, even if you guess the wrong person, most of the time they're going to be like, oh, I know that job. I know who that reports to. Let me forward it to the correct hiring manager for you. That'll happen. I have had hiring managers respond to me and say, hey, that job doesn't report to me, but I have this job that's not even posted anywhere on the internet. Would you be interested in interviewing? Ding, ding. You just discovered the hidden job market. I have had, I could not figure out who the right director or senior manager was. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to email the vice president. Vice president, they know who's hiring because they need to keep track of that budget. Now, the vice president is forwarding your email to the hiring manager. And even though both of those people are strangers, it's like, oh, the vice president thought enough of their email and their resume to forward it. I better interview this person. So overwhelming, you're not going to annoy anyone. You're not going to cost yourself an interview because if you're one of 3 people doing this, let's pretend 5 people do this coming off this webinar, which I doubt it. Most of you will not do this. You'd be making a mistake.
Send them out a challenge.
I'm sending out a challenge. Prove me wrong. Go out and prove me wrong. Test this stuff. Now, if you're convinced that something's not going to work, you're also self-sabotaging yourself and you're going to find a way to screw it up and make it not work. But if you give it a legitimate try and try this 10, 20 times, I guarantee you're going to get some interviews unless you're applying for stuff that you're dramatically not a good fit for. That would be the exception. Hey, if you're not even close to being interview worthy, then you're just choosing the wrong jobs to apply for. So thank you so much for the question. That was a really good one and one that I get common. I'm just going to check the stuff at the bottom of the Q&A. Thanks for all the compliments. I super appreciate you. Albert, if we could get the links to my LinkedIn and the my job search support group, Career Success Secrets Facebook group posted. All right. I'm going to tackle the ageism thing. Yes, I'm going there.
I want you to go there because I've gotten this question a lot, and I don't think I'm old enough to understand quite yet how to overcome it. But I would love to know how.
So I do work with people of all ages. So I work with people in their 20s, and I work with a lot of people in their 50s and 60s. And by the way, I've been doing this full time for over 10 years, like as my only paycheck. So, if I wasn't good at my job, I'd probably be out of business by now, because people would be complaining about how I didn't help them on the internet. So I have worked with a lot of people in their 50s and 60s. So one, I never want to discount or what someone's going through because ageism does exist. Racism does exist. Pisses me off, makes me really angry. If I could change all the problems of the world, like magically, I would do it. I would do it for you. Here's the thing for those of you that are worried about ageism or even racism or whatever. It's not something that you can control, but here's something that I've figured out. A lot of people think they are being discriminated against, and what it really turns out is they're not as good at job search skills as they think they are. Let me rattle off that list for you. So your resume isn't as good as you think it is. Your LinkedIn is not as good as you think it is. Your email messages are not as good as you think it is. Your networking or referrals are not as good as you think they are. Your interviewing is that's part of the reason why I went into the job search math, because some of you are getting better results than the average person, and you still think that someone has something against you. And that might be true. Like there might have been 1 or 2 instances where that's true, but If you simply say, hey, so a couple things, just because you were successful with your job search in the past doesn't mean that you're good at job search. Again, a lot of recruiters that are out of work right now, some of whom that work at Meta, Facebook, Google, or used to work there, that have now been out of work for a year because they just kept doing what they thought a recruiter wanted and just kept applying online, but they didn't realize that they didn't realize their resume doesn't have metrics, that their resume doesn't talk about business impact, that the resume doesn't make an argument about why they're a great fit for the position. Just because you have a big, impressive company on your resume does not mean that it's going to do all the selling for you, because they probably have at least 2 or 3 other people interviewing, and they probably have 20 to 100 other people that applying also have big stuff on their resume. So again, I could talk about overcoming ageism and even if you're 50s and 60s having your results. Here's what we found. Once we simply focused on better networking, getting directly to the hiring manager, people of all ages got more interviews. A couple misconceptions in terms of why people think that ageism is the major problem. And again, I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying it might not be the number one problem that you think you're experiencing. I ran into a vice president of marketing at an event, went to Harvard Business School, and she was complaining to me about like how bad her job search was, how like she was being discriminated against or whatever. And I started asking her questions, and I revealed that she was doing a lot of bad things she wasn't doing enough to stand out. Because here's the thing, you think you have 20 years of experience at a big company or whatever you have, you think but the thing is, the other people applying have that too, or a lot of times they do. So if your whole thing is, I have 20 years of experience in marketing, for a marketing job, of course, why aren't I getting more interviews? Well, just because you have 20 years doesn't mean that you're good. Do you mention the business impact and the results on your resume? Are you putting the extra step to get your resume actually seen by emailing or DMing people? I promise you, if you do those extra steps, you will get more interviews. Interviewing, I find most people that, again, not all people, I find most people, they're like, well, I've been hiring for years and I've been involved in the recruiting process for years, so I don't need to prepare my interview questions. I don't need to think about them ahead of time. I don't need to practice the answers out loud. And the people that are competing against you, and I hate to turn it into a competition thing, but only one person gets the job. The people that are competing against you, some of them are going, this is my dream job. Might not be your dream job, but to some people, it's way better than the job they have now. And they're like, I am going to work my butt off and I'm going to spend 5 to 6 hours preparing for this interview. And you're getting beat out. Or the same thing, and they're not just applying online, and they're building a network or building a community. And that's why they're getting the interview and you aren't, because they were willing to do more than you. That game of inches or game of seconds that we're using with that Olympic analogy. Here's a good story for people that are really experienced, people that are like my age and older. I'm a pretty experienced guy myself. I interviewed, I was recruiting for some marketing positions, and I interviewed people that were a top tier business school. Most of them had 10 years of experience. I also interviewed in that same week people that were fresh out of college. You would think it would be a slam dunk that the people with 10 years of experience. No. That person that was a fresh grad, they were more prepared and talked more about marketing or more about the role, knew more about my company than anyone else who had 10 years more experience. So are you making assumptions that just because you've been at it for a long time that you don't need to sell yourself? So ignore the 20 years, ignore the 13 and say, I have extensive experience. And then, by the way, If you say extensive experience or multiple years of experience, now they don't know how old you are. You don't have to list every job you've ever held on your resume. So those are some tips, and there's more if we had more time. And Albert, I'm going to leave it up to you. Oh, thank you, whoever said Mike is the real deal. He really cares about others.
I agree
Uh,
too.
that makes me a little emotional. If I never make $1 off of this, I'm happy to have done this, and I still have bills to pay and whatever. But tonight it's free. So I'm gonna pick Deanna Glory's question. I've heard the only way to get an interview in this market is to get a referral from someone that can vouch for you. Is this true? This is a really great question. So I did give one example of how you can get interviews without people vouching for you. That's tracking down the name and figuring out the email address of the hiring manager. That works. So if you hate referrals or your network sucks or that makes you really uncomfortable, then I would say do a lot more tracking down of the hiring manager or whatever. Now, some recruiters who don't talk to me and talk about the pros and cons, they'll poo-poo some of my ideas and they'll say, well, you shouldn't do it that way or whatever. And I would be like, well, if you were out of work for a year and no one was giving you interviews and you couldn't pay the bills and this got you interviews, wouldn't you do it? Of course you would. So recruiters don't always give the best advice. Recruiters give advice based on what they think they would like to see, but they're usually giving you advice from like the perfect candidates who have the perfect number of years of experience and skills and whatever. And so if you're not getting interviews without that, then you need to be willing to do this other stuff like email hiring managers directly. Now, can some of you get interviews in this market by just applying online? Some of you can, but it's a much smaller percentage. And I'm like, well, if you're going to have to apply to 100 jobs or 200 or 400, I heard someone applied for 2,000 jobs. If you got to do that, well, maybe it's if you've applied for, some people have applied for 50 to 100 jobs in this market and they haven't gotten any interviews. That's not everybody, that's some people. So
when I see that, by the way, that somebody says they applied for 1,500 jobs in the last 8 months, I'm not impressed. That's not a flex. That means that makes me wonder, how come at job application number 136, you didn't ask yourself if you could do this any better?
Yeah. And thank you for that, because that if you're reaching 50 without any interviews or one, well, don't be surprised because I gave you the job math, 0.15%. Unless you're applying to all small companies, then maybe you're at 4%. So if you're happy with that level of results, which is the average result, then just do a lot of applications. But personally, me, if I'm at 50 and I don't have any interviews, I'm going, damn, whatever I'm doing isn't working very well. How can I do this even better? And that's where me and my clients and, a couple of things. So I mentioned that I'm an ex-recruiter, both external and internal. So I can't believe I've had this many jobs in my career. I do not recommend that you follow my career path, by the way. I'm also an ex-salesperson. I'm also an ex-marketing person. I've taken sales and marketing techniques and I've tested them and figured out what worked and what didn't and applied them to the job market. So this is 25 years of research, which I revisit every year. And I interview recruiters and hiring managers every year. And I say, hey, if I put this resume in front of you, do you like it more than this resume? Some people will just be like, hey, do you want me to put the months on my resume? And the recruiter's like, yeah, I want you to put the months on the resume. But if I put two resumes in front of a recruiter like I have, and one's got months on them and one doesn't, I guarantee you the vast majority of the time that they don't even notice that the months aren't on one. So I'm of the big opinion, don't trust opinions. And you don't even have to trust what I'm telling you, although I base it on research. But if you don't believe it or you're skeptical of anyone's advice, including mine, do what I tell you to do 20 times and then do what you normally were doing 20 times. And And as long as you give equal effort to both, which was more effective? 90 to 95% of the time, I'll tell you, I've done the research, that it's probably going to be one of the things I recommended. So last but not least on the, do you have to have a referral? No, you don't have to have a referral, but it's a much higher percentage of success if you do. Now, here's something that most people don't normally talk about, and including recruiters. Most of y'all don't know how to get a good referral. Here's what I mean. And this is a mistake that people are making in communities and social media. Can it work? Sometimes it can work, but I'm going to tell you how to do it better. So instead of going on Albert's list and saying, does anyone know anyone that works at Google? Now, let's pretend I work at Google. I'm looking at that and I'm like, they didn't say why they wanted to know someone. They didn't mention a job. They didn't mention why they were good at the job. So like they're a stranger and I'm going to go out of my way to say, yeah, I work at Google. And then I'm going to get hit with a big favor for a referral. Like sometimes you can get lucky with people really empathetic, but even if you do get a referral, so I talk with a lot of my clients and ex-clients work at Google. One of my friends, just talked to her yesterday, recruited for Google. Here's a conversation I had with like 4 or 5 different Google people. The guy said, I have referred 30 people to jobs at Google this year. It wasn't actually this year, it was last year. He's like, only 2 of those referrals got interviews. I'm not trying to scare you away from getting referrals. I'm trying to teach you what's a good referral and what's a bad referral. If it's a stranger on the internet, or just, hey, Albert, you know someone at Google, can you ask them to refer me? They might say yes, but they're just clicking a button and you're being marked as an employee referral. Here's the problem. Hey, Audra, good to see you. Here's the problem with that. So again, only 2 out of the 30 people he referred got interviews. The 2 people that got referred were people that he had actually had a conversation with in real life. So what you're learning from that, stop trying to just use people for referrals and actually have conversations with them, which is why we didn't get a chance to talk about it tonight. For those of you in my Facebook group or Albert's list or clients of mine, I usually talk for 1 or 2 hours about advice conversations. People used to call them informational interviews, and my research determined that if you call it an informational interview, less people will agree to meet with you. The word interview scares them off, probably something most of you did not know. I don't call them coffee chats because some people hate coffee, some people hate meeting in person. I say, I would love to get your advice. Now, it's a little bit more complicated because I recommend, a couple things or whatever, but to help improve but if you simply started asking your referrals and your network for advice, they would feel a lot more valued and your relationship would strengthen with them. And you can spend time catching up with them if you knew them previously. And then here's the key part. At the end of the meeting, they're going to be like, oh, I feel great about Albert because like he was really into my advice and he liked what I had to say and whatever. And now I'm feeling good about Albert, better than I did before. And now I want to help Albert even more because he made me feel good instead of just using me for a referral. So it's actually at the end of our conversations with people, if we're going to ask to be introduced to a hiring manager, which is better than just filling out an online link. You could have an employee of the company forward your email to the hiring manager, even if they do not know them in real life. This is how people got interviews with me at Cisco. I've done this with a lot of different clients. There was one last thing I was trying to think of on this. For those of you that claim you don't have much of a network, even if it's meeting with your friends and family and asking them for their advice, you do not have to listen to their advice. But the benefit to asking it is they feel good and then they want to help you. Thank you so much, Deanna. I'm glad you're re-energized. And I'm glad you thought this was positive and realistic. Not everybody does. And I guarantee you, I don't teach stuff that's not easy for everybody to do. There might be a skill that needs to be learned. Again, these are not things you do once and you're naturally a master at it. But if you send out 20 requests for advice to people in your network or ex-classmates or ex-professors or people that you've lost touch with over the years, you're going to find that if you wrote a well-written email, 30 to 60% of them, if you get good at this, 30 to 60% of them will agree to a meeting with you, even if they haven't talked to you in years. And if you're not getting that high success rate, then you're not valuing them enough in the message, or you're scaring them off, or through other language, they feel used, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be the first one to admit I've made mistakes and I've asked for favors too soon and stuff like that. I'm so happy to see all the cool compliments. Thank you. Let's do, you choose, Albert. We can do a resume question, an email, a LinkedIn question.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of questions here about gaps. How do we handle layoffs and the date on our resume? For example, May 2018 to present or May 2018 to August 2023?
Yeah, it's a good question. For that particular question, you really could go either way. I normally lean towards the year you started and then till present. And then if anyone asks, you can just say, "Oh, I haven't updated it. I haven't updated it yet." But if they ask you if you're still there, you say, "No, I'm not still there. I've left." But if that makes you feel uncomfortable, then by all means you can put 2023 or 2024 or whatever. Which, by the way, part of the reason why I suggested you leave off months is because if you were laid off in January 2024 and we start creeping into April, May, and you're still looking, well, now it's a little ambiguous in terms of how you've been looking for, and you're going to be more likely to get more interviews because you left it ambiguous and left the months off. Now, technically, if you don't have any problems at gaps, could you leave the months on? You could. But I'm a big believer of this, and this is a really important component of what I teach. Other than your name and the contact information, every single word on your resume should have value. Otherwise, or potential value for the job you're applying for. Otherwise, you might be better off deleting it. Most of you by now, some of you who just got laid off, who haven't had to look in 5 to 10 years might not know this, but the average recruiter, or even the average person looking at a resume for the first time, they're probably looking at 10 to 20, if not 100 resumes in one sitting. And so the average person, the first time they read your resume, 6 to 8 seconds, 8 if you're lucky. So probably a common thing for those of you that have been on the market for a while, but it's important. So if you're including a lot of extra words, if you're including a lot of varies, or you're including a lot of flowery language and extra adjectives that aren't really stuff that keywords that people are looking for, we need to speak in complete phrases, not keywords, but hey, Graham, thanks for staying up late in the UK. Super appreciate you being here. Kudos to any of my Nigerian and European friends that are still awake. Appreciate that. I forgot. We answered the question, right, Albert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yep.
Let's do another one.
All right. We have so many more left here. And
if there is someone that looks like they're really struggling and they include a lot of detail, let's do one of those.
Okay.
Because I want to do a little mini coaching session to give those people that are struggling hope.
Yep. How about this one? What are recommended strategies and or protocol for those who are currently in contract roles to pursue direct hire roles at the same organization, particularly for those who are in career pivots into the tech industry?
Got it. So don't click any buttons, Albert, because I'm going to reread the question. So don't click it. I don't want it to disappear on me. Okay. What are the recommended strategies and or protocol for those who are currently in contractual roles to pursue direct hire roles? Let me do that one first. At the same organization. So there's no set protocol for all big companies. Everyone has slightly different rules, but I will tell you that with big companies, there tends to be protocols, which is some people love contract roles, and some people particularly those that aren't good at job search, they find it easier to get a contract role. Here's why. you're getting the contract roles because less people want a contract role, because it might be less benefits. It's less likely to be a long-term commitment. So there is a reason why you're getting those easier. It's because less people want them. And if you're only getting interviews for contract roles, then that's a sign that there are at least one or two job search skills you need to get better at. But she's asking a slightly different question. So can you, I would say, hey, worst case, somebody tells you no. Worst case, somebody tells you no. So go ahead and apply for it. I will tell you, unfortunately, there is a little invisible door or gate in a lot of companies where being a contractor is not the same as being full-time. I hate it, but it's for whatever reason. So, and there can sometimes be gates for people that are switching to dramatically different departments, especially if they haven't been in their role that long. Thanks for the compliment, Matt. So here's my recommendation to you. The benefit that you have as a contractor, or the benefit that you have as a full-time employee, is you have that company intranet where you can search for almost any department or job title on the planet, and you can figure out someone who's all the people that are doing roles related to what you're doing, and you can reach out to them. This is the commonalities thing that I talk about. Don't reach out to complete strangers. Reach out to people that you have stuff in common with. Here's the cool thing. If you're a contractor or you work at the company, the thing you have common is you currently work at one of the company locations. That's all you need. I have done this. All of my clients have done this. Some of my clients just look internally for new roles and have a lot of success. It's usually not as much of a pay bump, but if you really love the company, it's a great way to go. So one, you could do the same thing with the email the hiring manager technique. Don't just apply online and think, oh, I'm a contractor, I'll be considered more. No, do one step more than other people. Look up the name of the hiring manager. Email them, brief email explaining why you're a great fit for the role. Attach your resume. You're going to stand a much better chance. Even better than that is being proactive and reaching out to the teams and the departments that you're interested in. I was only at Cisco for like 5.5, 6 years tops. I'd probably reached out to at least 50 different people. At least one of them was on the call earlier. Actually, I think I was introduced by a mutual connection. And I simply said, hey, I also work at Cisco. I work in this department, but I'd love to learn more about your team. And I'm happy to share any advice from my part of the company or stuff. But for my long-term career growth, so now there's no time pressure on them. For my long-term career growth, I'd really love to learn about the team and get to know you in case there's an opportunity in the future. There might have been a job opening, and I still might have said it that way, because now I get an extra meeting with the hiring manager or someone on the team that all the other people applying didn't get. So that's one of the advantages to networking, is even if you can get an interview without networking, you will have an advantage over everyone else applying because you have had those extra conversations with people. So simply because we've been talking for a while, I'm not going to answer any questions about common interview LinkedIn stuff because we've already sort of done a little bit of that already. So let's try to find another question. I'm not going to repeat anything that's available earlier because we're going to make this recording available to people to look up. So I'm going to try not to repeat concepts talked about. Albert, can we get this posted? So this is being broadcast to Albert's List Facebook group, correct, Albert?
It is, yep.
So if you're already in Albert's List or you join Albert's List Facebook group, you're going to have access to the recording there. Albert, I would also like this available on YouTube. Can we get this uploaded to YouTube?
This will get uploaded to YouTube. Yep.
Awesome. So even if you're not on Facebook, there's two options for you going back and getting anything that we missed that you need repeated.
Yeah, we're down to a few more questions. We have 10 more. I know I see one that has been asked like a couple times and copied and pasted.
Okay.
How do you not undersell yourself without sounding boastful?
Yeah. So here's the cool thing about someone that asks a question like that. If you're worried about sounding boastful, you are the person I'm not worried about. You that asked that question, or you that thinking the question is like, oh yeah, I have that same question. You're just like I used to be, and you could probably do 10 times more selling yourself than you are now, and you probably wouldn't be close to being boastful about yourself. So here's a couple ways to think about it, all of which are important. One, if you do, I'm gonna close some windows so I can concentrate on the camera because it's one of my favorite things to say. If you do not tell them exactly why you should be hired for the role, they are probably not going to figure it out on their own. Probably not going to figure it out on their own. So if you shortchange yourself by leaving some stuff out, leaving some accomplishments out or whatever, then you risk losing out to someone who does. So maybe that gets you to change your behavior, maybe it doesn't. But I will tell you, the people that I work with that normally ask that question, I would say, well, type up your interview answers for the most common interview questions. So some people did ask about interviewing, so I'll talk about interviewing a little bit. Tell me about yourself. I hate the question, but it's common interview question that's asked, or some variation of that. Your whole answer to that question should be talking about why you're a great fit for the role, unless they specifically ask you something different than that after the fact. Focus on why you're a great fit for the role right off the bat from the beginning of the interview. So don't try to be nonchalant. Don't be like, oh, I'm trying to be authentic, so I'm not going to prepare. Some of you, so this is a really important point. So I want this for the video. Some of you are like, well, I want to be authentic, and if I practice too much, I'm not going to be authentic. That is a lie that you are telling yourself. Practicing is not preventing you from being authentic. Not practicing is preventing you from showing up as the best version of your authentic self. Not practicing is preventing you from doing that. So all of you are applying for different levels of salary or income or whatever, but I'm going to take the most common. Pretend you make 100,000. You might make more, you might make a little bit more. Job's worth 100,000. Benefits package on top of that, hopefully, healthcare, bonuses, stock. For some of you, that job is worth 130,000 or more. Some of you 200,000, 300,000 or more. And you're not willing to practice, and you're trying to convince someone to give you $150,000 worth of salary and benefits. I mean, you're earning it in exchange, but if you were a business owner and trying to convince them to hire you, you would try to convince them. Salespeople, no matter how, and I know sales is a bad word, but there are some great ethical salespeople out there.
Let's reframe that. Sales is not a bad word. I think I'd like to think of it as alignment, right?
Yeah.
If you're able to create alignment between you and those who are hiring you, it's a lot more of a conversation than a sale.
So that's getting a little too far away from my analogy, but you're right. So some of you have misconceptions that sales is a bad thing, and you probably just experienced a bad salesperson. But sales as a whole, makes the world go round. If people and marketing goes hand in hand with that. So if they don't explain to you why that car is better than another car, you might not know the best car for you. So here's the analogy for sales. A salesperson, even if the deal is only worth $10,000, they have probably practiced that presentation of why their product's the best fit at least 10 times. And for all of their normal sales jobs, they've probably practiced it over 100 times. And so for an $150,000 role, or a $50,000 role, or a $300,000 role, you're telling me you're not willing to practice 5 times what your common answers to interview questions are? When Denzel Washington or Jack Nicholson gives an Oscar-winning performance, do people scream out, oh, he practiced, he didn't come off as authentic. No, they're like, that was a really amazing performance. Like, amazing. So don't poo poo or discount practicing. And that practice and that taking the extra step of, I'll be ready for a next question soon, Albert. Um, that taking the extra step of approaching your preparation that way, when you're writing an answer out or saying it out loud, you'll be like, huh, there's probably even more I could have said there, or I probably could have articulated it, or I probably could have included some dollar amounts or some cost savings or some time savings. Or if you're still not sure, get feedback from someone else who is more successful than you are, currently employed, hiring manager, recruiter, but could be just someone who's currently employed in your role, and say, hey, is this a superstar answer, or could I make it even better? That will help those of you that have a tendency to undersell yourself.
I think we can do one more, just to be kind. And then if you have any additional questions, or if you want to ask these questions in my group or Mike's group, have at it. We're open 24/7 over there, and there are a lot
Yeah.
of folks who can answer as well. So,
Yeah. So if we
um,
don't get to your question again, we're going to drop the Mike Tomasello Career Success Secrets. If you're not on Facebook, don't tell me, hey, you're not on Facebook. Please answer my question one on one. I'm not going to do it. Like, my family doesn't eat if I work with people one on one for free. Happy to help hundreds or thousands of people at once for free. So if you don't like Facebook, you can create an account that you only use for job search, just so you can ask questions of me or Albert in Facebook. Your other option is following me on any social media platform. I prefer LinkedIn or Twitter, and asking questions on relevant posts. I do
yep.
try to respond to every question I see on a social media post. If you reach out to me one-on-one in DMs, unless you're interested in becoming a client, I don't have time to answer your question one-on-one in DMs. So I'm hoping we can do two questions, Albert, because this next one's going to be quick. So Dina
Okay.
asks, injecting some personality into resume LinkedIn likely more okay. You're absolutely right. LinkedIn, a lot more flexibility to show your personality, take a little bit more risks or whatever. I would still avoid oversharing stuff that might confuse people or being a deal breaker. But yeah, showing some personality is fantastic. Resume, simply because you might only get 6 or 8 seconds of their time and you're only on 1 or 2 pages. I recommend don't worry about personality. If you're qualified and they see your resume, you'll get to demonstrate your personality in the interview. So I wouldn't worry about it on the resume. Can we do one more, Albert?
Yep, let's do one more. Should a resume be attached to the initial direct email to a hiring manager?
Yeah, I already answered it, which is
Oh,
why
okay.
I marked it as answering live. So because you said it out loud, yes, if
Hmm.
there is a specific opening and you are emailing or DMing the hiring manager, yes, give them the resume. You're probably only going to have one shot on it. Shot at it. Attach the resume. Don't make them ask for it.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Let's see. Is applying with your LinkedIn profile a thing? Some job openings offer an easy apply option.
Yeah, great question. So, as with all things, you can do whatever you want. They've made it as an option, so you can, of course, do it. And I would say things, I know some people that are getting really lucky. And if you're going to do an easy apply or you're going to do an online application, do it fast. Like, focus on the jobs that were just posted today or that have less than 10 applicants or whatever. You can only really tell that on LinkedIn, not other platforms. But so if you're going to do it fast within 24 hours of it being posted or within 2 or 3 days, then yeah, you could do easy apply. But I will tell you, anything that's easy to do, that means it's easy to do for everyone else that's applying. And the number of people that are potentially applying is going to be that much higher, and it's going to be harder to stand out. So my recommendation, always be willing to do more than the other person. So do easy apply, then track down an email, track down a human, preferably the hiring manager, worst case, the recruiter, and email them directly with the same approach in more detail. So, great question. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. I had a lot of fun. If you did not have your question answered, that's totally normal. I could talk about job search for 30 hours and not cover everything. Albert's one of the best on the planet at job search. And no offense to you, Albert, but you and I only coached when we first started working together. We only coached together for 7 hours. There's
that's true.
There's stuff that I teach today that I've never talked to you about or shared with you.
Ooh.
The cool thing about you is you're so good at the other stuff, you haven't needed it. But I do just want to point out that there are additional layers on writing a good email we talked about, additional layers about how to have a more effective networking conversation, if that's not turning into a referral. So if any of those things sound like areas you want to get better at, join the communities and ask questions, or hire a coach, or watch more YouTube videos or whatever. So thanks for everybody. I love you all. I have nothing but hope and success sending to you. Albert, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's good to have everyone here.
I don't endorse a lot of people because unfortunately there's people that I think are well-meaning and good people, but they're teaching stuff that I don't agree with or that I know doesn't work as well as they think it does.
I have so many opinions on that. They're just trying to get a rise out of people on social media rather than helping people get a job.
That's such a great point. Some of the people on TikTok and Instagram or whatever, some are great and some are just trying to say anything to get you to comment and engage for their own ego or whatever. And Albert is one of those guys. And even though I know all of those marketing tricks, I refuse to use them.
Yeah.
I don't want to manipulate you and have to give you bad advice in order to do it. And Albert's the same way. And there's very few people on the planet that I would endorse like I endorse Albert.
And if I'm gonna bring you into a funnel, like, with any of my events, I'm gonna be of value. I'm not here to tell you I went on 5 vacations last year and have a nice car in the driveway and that you should, join my $10,000 mastermind group. I don't have one, and I really don't want one.
Better not. I would tell you to shut up. I'd be jealous. I don't think that many.
Yeah, but I mean, I also don't think it's an ethical way to tell people about stuff because I believe in access and accessibility and learning these things because at the end of the day, when the 130 people who attended this event live go to bed tonight, they'll be more informed on how they can find a job. And what's more important to me on that is with that job, they can raise their families and create great communities in their own homes and neighborhoods, and we all feel a little bit better because people who are working and people who are pursuing either their passion or something to help support them in their lives are in a much better place than those who are not. And so it's a very societal, global thing for me.
Awesome. Yeah. For those of you that want to keep in touch or support us or just thank us, the best thing you can do is to share your experience and your compliments online in public. You don't have to, like if you're not comfortable, you don't want people to know you're job searching, we totally get it. But you commenting in my Facebook group or on LinkedIn or whatever, likes and comments go a long way. Some people really are in it for the money and we're not. And so you spreading the good word that, we're not scammers and we're people that care and have advice that helps, just helps us help more people, even if they never spend $1 with us. So thank you all for
that. You can network for free. You can job hunt for free. You can ask for advice for free. And if you want to hop a little deeper, then, we'll take your wallet. But, that's not for tonight. I look forward to having all of you in our Facebook groups and answering your questions and making the world a better place. And Mike, thank you again for your time. I always appreciate it. I know getting 2 hours with you is not easy. So I consider this very much a wonderful, wonderful gesture on your part. And I hope we can do it again soon. Bye, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend. Talk soon.